Ray Gillenwater here at Starting Strength Boise with one of our favorite trainees and my future sister-in-law, Courtney Davis. We're going to show you how to squat. But before you squat, you're going to need to make sure your rack is set up correctly. So come on over, check out the J-hooks, or in our case, the bolts in the rack, and you should have them aligned roughly with your armpit. So take a look at the bolt height in relation to Courtney's armpit. You could probably go up one, but turn around, Courtney. So if you think about where the barbell sits on her back, these are her deltoids, shoulder caps. The posterior or rear deltoids is where the barbell is going to sit, right below the spine of the scapula. So this is your scapula, and there's this bony segment that juts out to the tip of your shoulder. The barbell sits right below that point. And if you look at that in relation to the uprights on the rack, that's roughly here. So we could probably get away with here, but I'd rather have this too low than too high, because you wouldn't believe how many people I've saved by running across the gym and pushing the barbell into the rack after a heavy set slips down their back and they go and try to re-rack it, and then it bounces into the bolt and twists them around and screws up the whole set. So you're better off if this is too low than too high. If you find yourself having to tiptoe the thing into the rack, you've set your hooks too high. Next, you're gonna wanna grab a barbell. So Courtney, go ahead and grab a standard 45-pound bar and put it in the rack. We did an entire video on barbells, so if you want to know more, check out the link in the description. Courtney, and most of you will use a 45-pound bar, but if you're significantly detrained, if you're smaller, if you're weaker, you might need a lighter barbell. So 45 pounds is the standard, and that applies to most people on the squat, but keep in mind it may not apply to you. One of the benefits of a barbell is that it is infinitely scalable. So start wherever you need to start, even if it's a broomstick, and then you can work your way up from there. And the next thing you need to do to make sure you're ready to squat is something you already should have done, which is make sure you're wearing the proper attire. So what I'm looking for in a trainee's attire is I want to ensure that there's going to be no impingement of movement in the bottom of the squat. I don't want anything around the knees or around the hips when she's trying to squat to depth. So you either want to wear a material that's loose enough to where it's not going to bind around your joints, or a material that's very stretchy and won't give you any resistance as you're squatting to depth. The next thing I'm looking for is t-shirt. So spin around for me. Since the barbell's sitting here, it needs a secure attachment to her back, and the shirt sits between her back and the barbell. So cotton, uncomfortable, thick, all those things are good. If you have something shiny, performance wear, those are slippery, and that is a worse situation when you're trying to attach the barbell to your back. And then lastly, as you've already covered in another video, Courtney is wearing lifting shoes, and you should be too. Lifting shoes, as mentioned, have a hard, non-compressible sole. They've got a bit of a heel to help you achieve position at the bottom of the squat better. They've got a metatarsal strap to keep your feet squished together. Courtney, I want you to get under the barbell and take your grip. I'm gonna point out a few features here. So Courtney's wrists should be straight. They're in flexion, so push them down a little more, a little more, a little more, right there. So maybe slight extension. This is flexion, this is extension. Her thumbs are on top of the bar. Her hands are as narrow as possible. The reason why narrow hands are important is because it squishes the posterior delts together and creates that shelf for the barbell to sit on. So Courtney, widen your grip quite a bit. Notice there's nothing for the barbell to sit on now. Bring your grip back in, and watch this bunch up as she brings her grip in more narrow. Yep. And take a look at her feet. So Courtney has placed both of her feet under the barbell. She's not going to unrack the barbell with only one foot under the bar, like in a lunge position. This is a secure, balanced way to take the barbell out of the rack. So once the barbell is in position, once her grip is correct, she is going to squat the barbell out of the rack. And since this thing is lower than she needs it, she's got plenty of room. So Courtney, squat the barbell out of the rack, just stand up. Good. And then Courtney's going to take one full step back. There's no need to take 5 steps back out of the rack. And the next step is for her to make sure her stance is correct. So as a coach, I'm kind of going through this checklist in my mind. The place you want to start for a stance with is you want to imagine a line from the tip of her shoulder blades down to the center of her heels. So her heels are roughly in line at the moment. Her right heel is slightly forward of her left, but not so much that I'd correct it. And then her toes should be out at 35 degrees. So Courtney, point your toes out a little bit more. From the back, I can get an image to see if there's a little bit of clear space between her shin and her big toe. And if there is, her toes are wide enough. And then Courtney, point your toes out too much. Then if there's too much clear space, obviously I can tell that they're too wide. And then Courtney, point your toes mostly forward, but just out a little bit. Yep, and you can tell, especially on the right one there, that they're not out enough. So that's kind of how you get a rough estimate as a coach. Let me have you widen your stance an inch. I think you narrowed it a bit. Good. Toes look good. Notice the clear space between the spine of the scapula and the bar. Notice the bottom of the shelf, and the barbell sits on the bottom of the shelf. Notice roughly straight wrists with thumbs on top. Grip is narrow. Notice her stance is correct. So now she's actually ready to squat. So bending over when you squat is kind of a controversial thing, but not if you think about it and study the anatomy and the physiology and the physics of the situation. So if you want more details on that, we've got plenty of videos on it. But if you bend over when you squat, you take load off of the knees and put it into the hips, which is good for a bunch of reasons. One, because your hips are more robust than your knee joints. So you want to put load in your hips if possible, just for the sake of your joint health. The second reason is there's way more muscle mass surrounding your hips than there is surrounding your knees. So if you bend over when you squat, you access all the muscle mass in your posterior chain. And if you stay bent over and drive your hips out of the hole, you'll be able to squat more weight, which means you'll be able to get stronger. Let's go over everything we've learned so far, and notice that Courtney's grip is a little bit more narrow than it was when we started, and that's because as your shoulders warm up, you're going to be able to bring your grip closer, so get it as close as you can. I like it so close that you get a bit of a callus on the meat of your palm because your hands are sliding out laterally, and that's another reason to use chalk on the squat. The tighter your grip on the squat, the better. The more narrow your grip is, the more likely you are to carry the weight on your back instead of in your elbows. So let's walk through everything we've learned so far. She's got her grip. Get under the bar, Courtney. Place it underneath the spine of the scapula, right on the posterior delts. And then I'm making sure Courtney's chest is squeezed up. So show me your chest in flexion. So notice there's no secure place for the barbell to sit when she does that. So now extend your chest, Courtney, and pinch your shoulder blades together. So squeeze my finger. Yep. Now notice how much more secure the bar is on her back. So chest up and shoulder blades squeezed together is crucial for stability of the barbell on your back. So now that you've got that stable position, stand up, take one step back. Notice that Courtney's gaze is down. Look up to go up does not apply to the low bar hip dominant squat. And Courtney's stance is correct, so her heels are in line with the tips of her shoulders. Her toes are out at about 35 degrees. She's going to bend over into the bottom of the squat with her knees all the way forward by the midpoint of the squat. And there's no pause at the bottom. So she's going to hit the bottom and then drive her hips up. Go. Good. And then the other thing you need to know is how much weight to put on the bar on day one. And that answer is going to depend. It's nice to have a coach with you there so they can look at your bar speed and your form and help you figure out how much weight to do on day one. In the absence of that, if you put too little weight on the bar, that's fine. It's better than too much. And if you notice your own form breaking down or your bar speed slowing down, then it's either too heavy or heavy enough. So pick a weight that's conservative for day one. Think of day one as practice, set in your baseline, and then you'll be adding weight to the bar 3 times a week when you squat, following the starting strength novice linear progression. If you're new to the gym, do the starting strength program because it is the most efficient way to get stronger. We've got this YouTube channel available to you as a resource, so subscribe to make sure you get the most up-to-date videos on how to perform the lifts. And if you need more help, check out the links in the description below. You can hire an online coach. You can train with a coach at one of our gyms. You can even apply to open a gym in your city. Thank you.